Hello and welcome to another episode of Conservation Conversations with BirdLife South Africa. I'm your host, Christina Hagen, joining you for the third time as a new host, but the first time I'm hosting solo, so please forgive me any technical difficulties. So tomorrow is Youth Day, and in South Africa we commemorate the 45th anniversary of the tragic Soweto riots, where school children marched against an unjust education system and were met by police. What transpired that day will forever serve as a reminder of the importance of the youth as leaders and change makers. Tonight, we have a panel of young birders, ornithologists, and conservationists who will be discussing matters affecting the youth with BirdLife South Africa's AV Tourism Project Manager and regular Conservation Conversations host Andrew de Blocq. The discussion was pre-recorded to prevent any technical gremlins with so many presenters, but we have most of our panelists on hand live tonight to answer any of your questions. But before we hear from any of these inspiring young people, please remember that you, our audience, can communicate with us using the Zoom chat room, and questions for our speakers can be posted into the Q&A box throughout the webinar. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you can use the comment feed for your comments and questions, and we'll try and get to as many of these as possible at the end of the webinar. If you would like to get in touch with us via our social media channels, please use the hashtag Conservation Conversations. All of our previous episodes are available on the BirdLife South Africa YouTube channel and our podcast. We'd also like you to please subscribe to our YouTube channel and help us grow support for our webinar content. Tell your friends to also subscribe, and let's try and get across that 1,000 subscriber threshold. BirdLife South Africa is proud to produce this weekly webinar series, but it does not run without costs. If you're enjoying Conservation Conversations and have found the content interesting and entertaining, why not consider dropping us a small donation towards our ongoing efforts to bring you new and exciting content that's free for all to learn and enjoy. Simply scan the Quicket QR code on screen or visit the Conservation Conversations website to find the link to the donations tab. And we'd like to say a big thank you to everyone who has supported these webinars so far. The BirdLife South Africa Conservation League donor competition is back, and all existing and new members who join our organization as a Conservation League donor before the 31st of August 2021 will be entered into a draw to win a 4-night stay at Zimanga Private Game Reserve in northern KwaZulu-Natal for 2 people. Show your commitment to giving conservation wings and win. Contact our membership team to find out more. And now on to some of our upcoming events. We're gearing up for our virtual African Bird Fair, which is returning to your screens, and this year is set to take place on the 30th and 31st of July 2021. Registrations for the event are open, and all you need to do to secure your seat is to visit eventmobi.com/birdfair, and I'll post the link in the chat a bit later on. General admission is free, and there are also 2 exciting keynote speakers and 3 workshops that you can purchase tickets to attend. Now, our tickets to the BirdLife South Africa annual Jackpot birding competition are almost sold out. In this competition, you stand a chance to win a 100,000 Rand cash prize with an additional 3 prizes valued at 10,000 Rand each. Entry to the draw is only 500 Rand. All proceeds go towards giving conservation wings, so be sure to bag your chance to win this exciting prize by visiting the BirdLife South Africa website. We are also excited to advertise our weekend bush breakaway with eco training in the Makuleke concession. It's situated in the northern extreme of the Kruger Park. Makuleke is considered one of the best, if not the best, birding locations in South Africa, with specials like racket-tailed roller, Pell's fishing owl, Arnott's cat, and 3 banded courses. The weekend of 13th to 16th August is open for bookings and will cost you a mere 5,400 Rand per head for the 3 nights, inclusive of all board and lodging as well as activities. For bookings and inquiries, please email projects@ecotraining.co.za. And we'd also need to let you know that our Cycle in the Bush event has had a slight change in plans given the continued COVID-19 pandemic and the associated lockdowns abroad. Phil Liggett will unfortunately no longer be hosting the event, but our team have managed to secure Stephen McGowan, who will join the ride and share his incredible story of surviving abduction by Al-Qaeda in Mali, where he was held for almost 6 years as a hostage in the Sahara. He's the longest surviving hostage of Al-Qaeda to date and will share his incredible story of survival, resilience, and determination with the attendees. To book your spot in September 2021, please email lindsay.smith@birdlife.org.za. And that's Lindsay with an E, but I'll also post that in the chat box. And now on to our main event for this evening. As I mentioned tonight, we commemorate and celebrate Youth Day ahead of tomorrow's public holiday. Our panelists are with us live this evening, but we're going to play a pre-recorded discussion. Each of them will be introducing themselves during the presentation. So now I will hand over to my colleague, Andrew de Blocq, who put in most of the effort for this discussion to take place. And I will start sharing the video.
Welcome everyone to our Youth Day panel discussion. Of course, this is coming to you pre-recorded. I think it's a really wonderful opportunity that we have tonight to assemble a few members of the youth, it being Youth Day, of course, and hear from them and find out what the youth think about issues in birding, issues in conservation and ornithology as well. We're going to start by introducing our panel. We've assembled a youthful panel, ages ranging from 17 through to 29, myself being the older culprit. I feel like being sub 30 at least for a few more months still qualifies me as youth, but I'll leave that up to your judgment. I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves this evening, just so that you can see their faces and hear their voices. This really is a wonderful panel of people who already have contributed a whole lot to birding and birds in South Africa, and I know will continue to contribute as they grow older and leave the youth bracket. And these are some of the future leaders in birding and conservation that we have tonight. So I'm really happy to kick off the introductions with Merlyn and Nkomo. Merlyn, will you take us away?
Hi everyone, my name is Merlyn Nkomo. I'm 27 years old. I am completing my master's in conservation biology at the FitzPatrick Institute of African Ornithology. I'm also a raptor biologist and vulture conservationist. I write about conservation and blog about birding, and I mentor a youth birding club in Matebeleland.
How's it, guys? My name is Mark Heystack. I'm 17 years old, and I started birding when I was about 12 with my friend, and then I joined a bird club, which totally boosted my birding experience and knowledge. And currently I am the host of the BirdLife Youth podcast. And I just wanted to say, Andrew, you definitely do still qualify as youth, because I did have you on my podcast just the other week. So no worries about that. But yeah, that's who I am.
Thanks for the confidence boost, Mark.
Hi, I'm Joel Vardy. I'm 20 years old and I'm from Cape Town, born and raised. And yeah, I'm a birder and I do guiding as well. And I'm currently studying biology and statistics at UCT. And I'm in my second year.
Hi everyone, my name is Kyrone Josiah. I'm 26 years old and I'm formerly from Pietermaritzburg in KZN. I currently just graduated with my master's in ecological sciences, and I specialize in urban ecology, specifically on the spotted thickening and its ground nesting behaviors. I am currently the conservation and aviatourism intern at BirdLife South Africa.
Hi everyone, I'm Toni Geddes. I'm 22 years old. I currently am busy studying botany, zoology and geography through UNISA. And then also along with my fiance, we both own a bird tour and wildlife tour company called Expedition Birding, Global Bird and Wildlife Tours. And then I've also been birding for most of my life, growing up in a birding family. I absolutely love getting out there, and we often do youth outings and bird club outings, and it's just absolutely lovely. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Hey there, everybody. I'm Fiance. My name is John Kinghorn. I'm currently studying my master's in criminal law with a focus on the illicit trade in wildlife and plant products. I'm a candidate attorney at a law firm here in Johannesburg, and I'm also running expedition birding, global birding and wildlife tours, and have been for some time now alongside Toni. And yeah, been involved in the guiding and professional aviary tourism industry for quite some years now, and a birder since I can remember.
Thanks very much, everyone. Great to meet you all, and that's our panel, everyone. We're going to move on to our first question for this evening. We've got a range of them to get through, and I'm just going to facilitate the discussion from here, but I'm going to try to make sure that most of the voices you hear will be from our panel tonight. Our first question I'm going to direct to our two youngest members on the panel, Mark and Joel. Mark, I'll allow you to respond first because you are the youngest on the panel at 17. And I want to know, as really young people, how did you get into birding? Why did you fall in love with birds? We're going to touch on the stereotype just now that birds are for older people, and often we hear stories about people only really getting into birding at a much advanced age. Now, you are two people kind of under the age of 21 who are just absolutely besotted with birds. So tell us, starting with Mark, how you fell in love with birds and why.
Alrighty, so when I was 12, I started birding. And at the beginning of the year, I wasn't, and at the end of the year, I was. But I have no idea what happened in between. It was me and my friend who discovered this passion. And yeah, so we guess it was sort of like, I don't know, we were always outdoors and hiking and enjoying what nature has to offer, adventuring, I could say. And then one day, I guess we just looked at a hardy-dar and discovered that it has a second name, or used to have a second name, hardy-dar ibis. And so we picked up our bird books that we got given many years ago by our grandma's friend or whatever. Well, that's true for me. But and then we saw, oh, there's a different type of ibis, and there's a yellow, sorry, not a yellow one, a white one, and there's one that's bald. And so it was just very interesting. And so it kind of grew like that. And I started doing birding in my local neighborhood and just discovering stuff. And then one day I went to a birding lecture by Peter Ginn, a awesome bird author, and bird book author, and he was doing a guided walk in the botanical gardens here in George. And his assistant, who was a bit younger than him, he introduced me to Lakes Bird Club, which is my local area's bird club. And so from there, me and my friend both joined the bird club, and we kind of got to know what birding was more and more. And we became more famous because we were by far the youngest birders in the bird club, and brought the average age of the bird club down to like 73. So that's basically how I started. And yeah, since I can remember, I was looking at birds. I just wasn't called a birder as such. And then I only recently discovered it when I was 12. So yeah, that's basically how I started.
How about you, Joel?
So I was really fortunate to be introduced to birds by my grandpa when I was really young, like 1, 2. And according to my parents, I've been reading bird books since I was about 3 or 4, looking through the bird book, looking at the illustrations. And my parents aren't birders, but they've always loved being in nature. And my grandparents used to take me birding. So basically, when I got my first set of binoculars at about, I got them for my 7th birthday, and from then I started keeping a list, and it's pretty much gone downhill from there. I started getting a bit more involved in the birding community, and when I was a teenager, so I joined the SA Rare Bird News in 2015, and that's when the twitching started and the bit more fanatical side of birding. Yeah, so I don't know exactly what drew me to birds, but I think it's sort of growing up around birds, and it's just always been something that's been part of my life. So I don't know what my life would be without birds.
Fantastic. Mark, I'm just going to come back to you for a brief moment. what are your impressions of what your friends think at school? Do they think it's weird that you're into birds?
No, much worse. But yes, to some extent. Well, yeah, I started birding with my friend, and now we're both stuck in it. So for him, it's not that big of a deal. Uh, but yeah, I mean, I go to school, and when I first joined my school, it was like, the kids wanted to know, what are your interests? What do you like doing? And I'd say hiking, wildlife photography, exploring, and birding. And they'd be like, oh, okay, so you're a nature guy. And then they say, what, do you like take photos of birds and bugs and bushes? And I'd be like, yeah, exactly. And then I'd show them some of my photos, and they'd be like, gee, I wish I could take photos like that. And then I would just think, but you can. You just got to start. And they don't get that because I think the trend of youth has never been about getting together with your friends, grabbing your camera and putting your hiking boots on and going to photograph some animals. It's more like, getting together with your friends, grabbing your phone and putting your Vans on and then going to take some selfies. So it's kind of like the opposite, the birding breed is very different. So I think, yeah, since I joined my school, I've been there for 4 years now. Now everyone knows me as the nature guy, but I'm sadly still the only one who's interested in wildlife in my school. So I'm famous for it, but nobody particularly sees it as something that is really cool, if I can say it that way.
Okay, yeah, that seems to be pretty much my impression of how things are. So maybe let's deal with this stereotype up front. And I'm going to call on John and Toni. And you guys, what is your impression of the stereotype of birding being something that's reserved for older people? Something you pick up in your retirement. Here we are 6 young birders under 30, but it still seems to be something of, it's kind of out of the norm. What are your guys' impressions of that stereotype?
I think it's coming a long way. Definitely. I mean, I recall back in the day how many less youth there were involved in birding, and it has skyrocketed in terms of the amount of younger birders coming into the scene. So I definitely think the stereotype is still there. I myself shared the exact same, almost copy-paste scenario that Mark had dealt with, where in school I was known as the nature dude. And if you said you were photographing birds, either you were getting asked about whether you were photographing women or if you were actually photographing the feather kind of birds. So that has remained and hasn't disappeared. But I think through it all, and the fact that birding is becoming a lot more available to everybody, and especially available to the youngsters through social media and stuff, I definitely think it's expanding and it's booming amongst the youngsters, and it's becoming something uber popular and super cool as well. So yeah, I think it's definitely growing. I think slowly but surely that stereotype is definitely going to start phasing its way out as the age of majority starts dropping.
Toni,
no, so I definitely agree with John on his points. But I think I would say that probably that stereotype is very fast changing. Definitely a lot more youth since I started birding. I mean, when I started birding, it was really just old people, also back in the day. And probably from my teen years, being 14, 15, it's just changed completely. I've met so many youth birders. When we do twitches or birding or wherever we go, there's always youngsters around, internationally even. I know in the States, it's become a very popular hobby for youngsters, even in the UK. So I definitely think that stereotype is changing. And added to what Mark said as well, when I was in school, it was completely weird. A lot of my friends would ask me, what are you doing this weekend? Or like Flock at Sea in 2017, I was in matric. And I explained to them that I was going on this big boat to go and look at birds on the ocean, and they had like these stunned expressions. They had no idea what I was talking about. And they're like, you actually get birds out at sea? And the more I try and explain it to them, it's like the weirder it got. So No, definitely agree with Mark on those points. People don't understand it really until they get into it. But yeah, no, I definitely think the stereotype is fast changing, and it's not just becoming an old person's hobby anymore. It's definitely becoming an all type of people hobby. You know, black, white, Indian, all races, all ages. Definitely.
And I'd just like to add something there, Andrew. Yeah, it's just not thought of something that kids do really. Now, more specifically kids, but I think the way that many youth these days are getting into birding is the advantage of photography. Because now you don't just get to go out and look at a bird in the field and say, "Oh, I saw that bird." Now you get to experiment with this, camera and use it for different things, and you can share your photo around and practice this new hobby within birding. You're taking photos as well, so it's photography as well. So I think photography has a big impact on the new amount of birders today, and how birding is growing in the youth community and other communities in terms of age. So I was busy chatting to two young wildlife photographers on one of my recent podcasts for the Birding Life Youth podcast, about wildlife photography. And they weren't specifically birders, but I got to chat about some interesting topics of their experiences in wildlife photography and that stuff. So as I said, now that I've been at my school for 4 years, a couple of years now, everyone knows me to be the nature guy, but I'm still the only one who's into wildlife. And all of the young South African wildlife photographers that I've seen on social media are following each other and like commenting on each other's posts saying like, "Oh, that's so cool," or "Oh, I think this one looks better than that," just helping each other out actually. So I think it's a really cool community that's going on here. And one of the teenagers that I was interviewing last week on the podcast was a young girl who has just started this WhatsApp group for South African young wildlife photographers. And using the WhatsApp group that they're on, they're actually all learning from each other and getting more wildlife photography skills and stuff. And as they go along, they'll get better at like sharing, get at photography, and have better photos to share on social media. And I think they'll circulate stories of cool things they see. And from this, other people will start to see how youth are actually taking part in stuff like photography and appreciating nature. So I think it's a really cool little community that's going on social media, where there's these young wildlife photographers that are getting better and better and are almost growing in terms of their skills, because they're all sticking together and supporting each other in this wildlife photography thing. And I think photography has a big part in how birding and wildlife interests is growing among youth.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. You make some really good points. I think what I'm getting from the three of you is that birding is still struggling to break that stigma. There's still this kind of strong idea out there that birding is not for young people. But I think what I'm also getting from you three is that it's starting to change. I think we're going to get back to discussing how we can accelerate that change a little later. Merlyn and Kyrone, I'd like to bring you two in here. And the photo on your screens now is one of the things on Google, as you type in bird watching on Google Images. And this is one of the first images that comes up. And of course, it's a group of older folk, all white, all kind of sporting these odd clothes that birders tend to wear. But basically, I mean, this is a lily white group of people, and there's a stereotype internationally, but also in South Africa, that birding is a hobby mostly enjoyed by white people, especially older, kind of more wealthy white people. And I hear you two are people of color on this panel. You've achieved amazing things already, and you're starting out on your journeys. Both of you are kind of academics as well. What are your thoughts on this idea of birding being an older white person thing? I think starting with Merlyn, and then we'll go to Kyrone.
I think this stereotype is actually very justified. Even where I'm from in Zimbabwe, birding is still largely for older white people. And I say for carefully because everybody is welcome to, but it's quite difficult to be a part of something you don't identify with. I was hearing Mark's testimony about his experience at school. I was laughed at when I mentioned I had interest in wildlife. And it was something I had to hide from then onwards, because everybody associates liking wildlife with white people. And the important thing to realize is the problem is recognition and representation of people of color already in the wildlife and birding space, because as social creatures that people are, it is hard to aspire to be something that you don't see people like you in or being. And even when you do aspire and you get in there, there's not a lot you find in common. You feel lonely going out to bird with older white people. The conversation is not the same. The mannerisms and the things you'd notice and want to express yourself in that kind of environment makes it difficult for you to stay in it. So this stereotype is really justified. And also access is one of the main problems, especially in Africa. I'm sure it prevails around the world as well. Most Black people and other people of color are previously settled in areas that are far from natural spaces. So traveling to places where you can bird or having safe recreation of green spaces or parks is a major issue. So even if you had an interest, there would be such a cost on you to have to travel to a park that is safe enough for you to bird, or where other birders who are mostly already white older people would be comfortable to come and meet you at. And also sometimes access in terms of who owns certain places. There's some private places that you could go to, for example, to learn to bird. And most of those places are owned by old white people. So it stays a club of the same people who are growing older and older, and who happen to be richer than the people of color trying to get on. And with the wealth, the issue of wealth also is, it's not really that people in birding are rich. I would like to think not, but it's also that birding is a very expensive hobby. The cameras you talk of are a lot of money, especially for a Black kid. The binoculars, I personally don't think there's any factories in Africa producing binoculars. And that means getting them on the African continent is quite costly. So it makes it harder and harder and not worthwhile for somebody that would even get to a point of knowing birding as a worthwhile hobby or a career path to go on.
Thanks, Merlyn. Kyrone, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, great question, Andrew. And there's so many ways to answer it, really. But I also put it down to, in terms of South Africa, it's only just recently, so 25 years plus, I'm saying is recent, but explain why further. It's apartheid era. I really compare birding to golf and how it came to South Africa and it blew up, but still for the whites and the rich, but it's changing, obviously. Years back, people of color were really restricted in going to parks and zoos even, and just getting those chances to appreciate wildlife, which was nurtured for generations in people or white people, where it was like, oh, my grandfather will take me to the bush and let's spend some time getting out there and getting closer to nature. It was really restricted for people of color. And I know that it seems a long time ago, but it's only been one generation since then, basically. And there hasn't been enough time to transition into that. There's now, even though back then the wealth was really with a minority, with white people mostly, but now there's rich people of all colors, and still we have this issue of people not getting into it. And it all stems from what was nurtured into them. That wildlife appreciation that I wasn't raised with, or maybe Merlyn wasn't raised with, but Mark and John were raised with. They may say like their parents weren't birders, but somewhere down the line, they had somebody that was passionate about what they are doing now, whether it be birds or other wildlife. And in terms of the wild thing, as people are scared really when they look at birders and they see the really expensive binoculars and cameras. People don't really realize that, hey, you don't need to have the best. Yes, having that will elevate the experience so much more, but you don't need to start off with that. And also, I think it's very it confuses people, our community especially. It's that everyone thinks, no, it's only for them. And honestly, it only takes one bad experience for a beginner to say, let me stop this. It only takes one experience for you to go out. Like I went with my father in Kruger the one time and went to the bird hide, and I bought my father 800 rand binoculars. And my family was like, why are you spending so much on a binoculars? Like, if only they knew. But the thing is, we were in the bird hide and he's like, oh, what's this bird? What's that bird? And I couldn't explain because I wasn't as educated as I am now. But there was somebody next door and it's like, you are actually taking up space in the hide. They told myself and my father that. It was like, why don't you just go somewhere else and let us do this? We want to take some nice pictures, you're making noises. And that was enough. My father really loves his birds, really loves it, probably more than I do. And that was enough for him to be like, this is not for us. And it spreads like wildfire in the community because there's so many issues in our country. And it only takes a little thing for one person to hate what another person does. These are issues that I want to change, and that's why I'm here as well. And hopefully when people view this, they'd be like, let me take my friend that's a person of color and let me take them out on a Saturday. Let me understand their story as well and what makes them not understand my position, my appreciation for wildlife.
Yeah, thank you to you both for sharing. I think it's so important that we hear these voices and these stories coming through. And I think it's so great that we have a platform like this to facilitate these kinds of discussions. I think you've proven that stereotype is well and alive, and we're going to touch on kind of how that's starting to change. But I think these are really important things for people to hear. I would think there's a challenge in there for groups like BirdLife South Africa, for our bird clubs out there, and for the birding public to make our communities more accessible and make an effort to introduce and people of color, people of other cultures, and make them feel welcome in the communities. There's clearly, from what you guys are saying, huge barriers to people entering birding, whether it be age related, whether it be culture related, race related. You've all made really, really great points, and again, I just think it's great that we have these conversations, and I think they're important for people to be aware of.
Can I just add there quickly? I don't think it's actually our bird community, our birding community, and those bird clubs that are really an issue, because I've attended some forums, especially the Kyrone forum, and I call them the living fossils there. And I told them to their face, so I won't get in trouble for this. But they welcome youth and they welcome diversity, and they really want it to be there. I think the issue is we have many people in this community that feel it is also an elitist sport. It is for them. It is not for everyone else. And it's a very small group, I believe, actually, from what I've seen and whilst working on. It's a very small group, but it's enough for their personal interactions to affect everyone else around them. So I also think we need to also highlight the amazing job that our birding groups actually do, and these forums, and try and get younger people and people of color to attend these things, because people are like, no, it's boring. What's this talk about? They just need to experience one day at one of these talks to really get that passion rubbed onto them from these older people and realize that they need to be the baton which needs to be passed on, because I think that's the fears of lots of these older white people that are really passionate about it. Like, they don't know who to pass the baton on to, because even amongst the youth, white, black, Indian, whatever, there's so many other issues that we have that they did not have back then.
Also got something to add to that, if that's okay. We're going on quite long on this topic. I think going back to what I was saying about the kids at school, they don't understand why I'm interested in birding. Like, they say, okay, Mark's a nature guy. that's his thing and let that be. You know, they don't really understand why I do it. And it's very hard for me to explain. I think the only way for someone to actually understand is for them to do it themselves. So I've actually influenced one of the Oaks at my school to come with me during break time, walk around, look for some birds around school. And I'm very fortunate that I go to school in the Garden Route Botanical Gardens. Yet I'm literally the only one in my school who's interested in wildlife, which I'm very sad about. And I'm trying to fix that problem. So watch this space. But they don't understand why I think nature conservation is so cool. And I think you've got to know what you're conserving in order to be excited about conserving it. And, you know, I'm not exactly a nature conservationist, but I'm interested in birding, and I want to make sure that we live sustainably so that we can make sure that animals and birds specifically are here for the next generation, and so that the next generation knows how to take care of it in everyday life. So, and I think that's the reason that the majority of youth today don't get why we are so keen on wildlife. They haven't had a proper introduction to nature. So I think that getting introduced when you're younger sort of opens up your eyes as to what this is all about. So you don't just push it aside when you're older, say in your teens, and you're like, nah, I'm not interested in that, you know. So I think that maybe by sticking together as youth, we can show other kids and young people that it's not an old person's thing to do, to walk around with binoculars chasing after 10 to 11,000 of species around the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think all three of you raised really nice points, and I'd like to kind of wrap up this question with just picking up on something Merlyn said around representation and having people like you to enjoy things with and to look up to and look to emulate. I think that's a really important point, and I think it's great that we have people like yourselves and everyone on this panel being of the younger generation, you know, forging these paths and becoming role models, and people seeing your success, seeing your interest, your passion. I think that makes a real difference in terms of attracting more people. So I think the more we can encourage that and empower people that can fulfill those roles, the better. I know it's something that BirdLife South Africa is trying hard to do. Perhaps there's more we could do, but I think, for instance, it's great that we've got an Indian lady as our honorary president. Totally there on merit. I mean, she's an amazing professor. She was South African Woman of the Year. We've just renamed our library after Saul Sithole, who worked for 62 years at the Transvaal Natural History Museum. I mean, that might seem like a small gesture, but I do think representation, whether it's representing younger people, representing people of different cultures and races, I think that really is important. So something to chew on for the listeners. But I'm going to wrap that question up because we do have quite a thing to get through. But I do recognize that's a really important conversation to give the full body to. Merlyn, I'm going to stick with you. You established a junior bird club in Zimbabwe. I'd like you to tell us a little bit about it. I'm going to bring a picture up of it now, and tell us why you thought this was a good idea, what needs you thought it was fulfilling, and how that journey has gone.
Thank you. So this club for me has been a lot of years of work, and I'm very proud to say that it has stretched all the way from Bulawayo to Vic Falls now, and we have over 100. I think right now the latest figures are 108 youths on our WhatsApp group. Most of them paid up with their subscriptions. But in 2015, when I'd come back home to Zim from my internship, I had the idea of starting a birding club and affiliating it to BirdLife Zimbabwe. And I wanted to start it as a club in my university because I was a university student. And why was because I was the only student within my course of forest resources and wildlife management who cared for birds. So even within the wildlife community in Zimbabwe, a lot of young people still have not seen the value of ornithology or birding. But it took a while. I couldn't start a club up. I had to use other means. I started doing seminars. I chose Vulture Awareness Day and made good friends with the museum director and had an annual event seminar that I created. And these seminars were so successful because I had a lot of people from my community, and by my community in Zimbabwe, I mean Black people from all walks of life. And I had a lot of the white people and scientists coming to one room. And my family is a very supportive family that has journeyed with me on this journey, trying to also understand, but afraid to ask, why the hell are you doing birds? So they would come to support me. My little brothers from high school with their friends, my mom from her work with her friends and their kids. So it was, we're showing up for her, but they brought all these other young people who wanted to see the museum for free and see me present to white people. And they started to see me up there. And with each year that was coming, I was adding things onto my life. I joined a vulture monitoring project, and I thought the first seminar would just be for that year. But next year, a week before Vulture Wednesday, I was like, oh, I should do that seminar again, totally. And I organized it. And every year I had to have more information to give people. I did one seminar and themed it culture and conservation. I brought a historian and writer, a traditional expert called Patisanyati, to talk to the issue of use of vulture body parts and muti and the African tradition. I brought in people from the parks, the ecologists at Wangi National Park. I brought in Fatsai Matsumbo from BirdLife. And when I say I brought in these people, all my seminars, by the time I left Zim, I'd done 5 of them in 5 years. I never paid a single dime towards these things. I was networking, and these people would simply offer, I can come down to your city that day and give a talk. And it would be so wonderful. People would come to support me because they know me from church, or they know my father. They would bring their kids, and they would see somebody like them climbing up trees, holding vultures, doing something that is totally out of this world. I got museum specimen mounts, and a lot of people know the word vulture, but they've never actually seen the bird. To see the massive wingspan, to actually demystify those thoughts and perceptions people have was wonderful. And right at the end of my time in Zim in 2019, I did my last vulture seminar, and I just said I would like all the youth who are interested in joining a bird club to write their details here. I always had a logbook every seminar, and a lot of youth were really interested. We formed a WhatsApp chat group. We met at the park that is in the city, and we've been taking it one day at a time. We don't go to fancy places. We go to the park in the city, right in the city. Sometimes they go to the fringe of the townships they live, and they bird and they encourage each other. Now we've expanded it to youths in Wange area and Victoria Falls area. So we're the Matebeleland branch of the BirdLife Youth Chapter. We're called Matland Chirpers. And this is a very diverse group of youth. They're not all from the university. Some of them have now gone on to sign up for the university degree I did. Some of them, the guy standing on the left here, is an amazing wildlife photographer. And his brother approached me and said, my brother is in high school. He really loves birds. Could you mentor him? His photography is amazing. The information he puts out on some birds, I'm learning so much from him. And I think by the time he finishes his degree, he'll be an amazing ornithologist. Some of them are getting into learner hunter guiding and getting a license. And some of them are just youths without employment or who are not in education that have something to do, you know, something to give them hope, to give them a safe community of friends. And it's a project I'm really proud of. They're doing so well. Yeah.
That's incredible. So well done, Merlyn. It really is inspirational to see those kinds of movements coming through, and people like yourself being change makers. And it just sounds like you saw a gap, you saw a need, and you kind of made things happen, and that's incredible. Well done to you. I'm going to now go to two other change makers on our panel, John and Toni. We haven't heard your voices in a while tonight. You guys were two of the founding members of the Youth Africa Birding movement, which was based out of a Facebook group, I guess, and became quite a bit larger than that. You guys, you've also done something similar to Merlyn in bringing young Africans together around birds and birding. What was your motivation for founding this movement, I guess I could call it? What have been some of your highlights, and how is this movement going for you?
So yeah, it's crazy to think how long ago we formed that, and it's quieted down a little bit now. But I think that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think it's actually encouraging, because it means there's so many other platforms. You know, like Mark highlighted earlier, it's now a community. It developed from what was back then, what we had formed was a single Facebook group of a couple individuals, put together to encourage us to go on outings and that, and spread the word in terms of birding amongst, the youngsters, has now just developed into a full-blown community. So it's not necessarily a bad thing that Youth Africa Birding isn't all that active anymore, because I just think that the youth birding community has expanded to just that degree. I think the main thing for us was we started Youth Africa Birding, and we just started trying to encourage young birders, because we got tired of the stereotype. We had been very fortunate to, through our work in industry, especially myself in those beginning formative years of Youth Africa Birding, have had the opportunity to travel abroad. And I think it was a bit of an eye-opener for me when we went to the likes of, Europe and the States. And like Toni mentioned earlier as well, it's mind-blowing, the youth birding scene there. I think the real eye-opener for me was going to the British Bird Fair for the first time, and there was just youngsters everywhere. And it wasn't this old person stereotype. Yes, there was a lot of old people running around, but at the end of the day, there were just so many youngsters, and the youngsters were doing their own thing. They were doing manic twitches because there was a new flippin' bird scene at the bird fair, and they wanted to add it to this obscure list that they were busy keeping. Then the oaks were going jawling in the evenings and taking their binoculars into the clubs, and they just made it exciting. And I sat back and I looked at it, and we discussed it in our little group of young birders, and we said, guys, this is really what we need to try and do here. And I think in those formative years of Youth Africa Birding, that's definitely what we did, and I think it was encouraging. We reached out to countries in Uganda, Rwanda, Namibia, Mozambique to a smaller extent, and Tanzania as well. And we got a couple of people involved and doing very similar, but not nearly as the amount of incredible work that Merlyn has done, but just going out and forming these little sort of isolated pockets of birders and trying to spread the word from there outwards. So that's basically what we try to do. I mean, Toni can Toni can add things on in terms of how she feels about the reasoning behind why we formed, Youth Africa Birding. But at the end of the day, it was really because we wanted to try and get more young birders involved, and we wanted to, the more people we can get involved at the end of the day, Andrew, means that there's more people involved in conservation. And although we enjoy birding, and although it's a fat blast for us, at the end of the day, I think at the core of all of this entire panel here cannot not say that at the core of their hearts and the core of the reason why you do what you do in terms of your involvement in birding is because you guys care about the conservation of birds and bird life.
Toni, anything to add from your side?
Yes, no, definitely. So thinking off at the top of my head, I think the group is probably about 5 or 6 years old. It was started around when I was 15 or 16, maybe 17. And I think what a game changer was for me, like I met John when I was 14 years old, and he was the only youngster, him and Werner were the only youngsters I knew. or knew of even. And I mean, John himself is 4 years older than me already, but I still class that as youngster, you know. So when we got together and we decided to form this group, we had this view, this wish, you know, that we wanted to just connect young naturalists. I can't even just say birders, you know. There's people on the group that are into dragonflies, into frogs, into butterflies, into trees or plants, or, you know, whatever the case is. And we just wanted to create a platform to connect all of those people and to show the youth, you know, back then when it wasn't really cool, that it was something cool to do, and there were other youngsters out there doing it. And I agree with John, it has died down, but not in the sense that the group has gone quiet or anything. It's just the fact that the platforms has expanded so much. You know, I'm on quite a few different WhatsApp groups for youth, and, you know, there's plant groups and dragonfly groups and just young birding groups. And like Mark said, there's, apparently I didn't even know about it, but there's a young wildlife photography group, and that's how it's expanded, because it's an easier way to communicate than it is on a Facebook platform, you know, to post or whatever. But no, definitely an eye-opener, and it was lovely to see so many youth coming together, and it was growing year by year by year. And I think what was also really awesome is the fact that we had youth outings. I mean, something that was memorable to me was one year we decided, I think in our first year, we decided to organize a warbler weekend, mainly focusing on warblers. We got well-known author Fancy Peacock. He came and he spoke to us about warblers and explained how to identify them and their calls and their behavior. And that was just such a learning curve for so many youngsters. And I think, you know, being able to create that platform has definitely helped the youth birding scene. And then also looking at the pictures you posted here, the year you guys went to Champion of the Flyway, you guys were the Youth Africa birding team. You guys got all kinds of youth from South Africa, especially, together, a young team going to an international event, an international conservation event, and just showing them that, you know, youngsters are also interested in conservation and birding. And then when John and I did it again, we decided to make it a world youth birding thing. John and I from South Africa, Jean-Michael Blake from Zimbabwe, and then Dan Rouse from Wales, actually. And I think our main thing was just to show that we are part of this and we want to help conservation and bird conservation. And this being the Champion of the Flyway event being one of the main conservation things out there, you know, was just such an eye-opener. It was such an incredible experience, seeing these thousands and thousands of birds migrating, you know, getting like hundreds of steppe eagles fly past you, and honey buzzards and crested honey buzzards, and, you know, then learning about the harsh side where these birds are getting shot down, getting trapped, you know, getting caught and just being killed for fun, and then, you know, they never return. So that was quite an eye-opener as well, and definitely something that is worthwhile to any youngster who wants to be involved in something like that. It is an amazing cause and an amazing conservation initiative.
And I think, you know, the reason we did this was because we wanted to, again, like I said to you, you know, we really wanted to get more youth involved in conservation. You know, Andrew, you would know, I mean, there you are in the picture in your handsome coiffed and beard. You know, we did that because we wanted to, you know, show the world that, first of all, there are young birders on the African continent. And second of all, we can make one massive difference. So even though we didn't win that race that year, we ended up winning the fundraising. You know, out of all the teams that participated, we ended up raising the most. Yeah, this young birders team raised the most funds towards that particular year's cause. So again, showing the world that young birders are a force to be reckoned with, and that our voices need, and that we want our voices to be heard as well. And even though we never did raise the same amounts of funds we did that year, in subsequent years, we ended up going and winning the race itself. Out of all the global teams that participated in the world's most grueling 24-hour race, we went and won it and set a new record as well for the most amount of species seen in a day in that specific race. And yes, it is a bird race. Yes, we're doing it to fuel some manic side within us all that enjoys, you know, doing big days. But at the end of the day, I can vouch for every single person who takes part in that day. We're doing it for the bird race aspect, but we are birding because at the back of our minds and in our heart of hearts, we're racing for conservation. Those entire events that we participate in and that we are currently youth participation in is around a BirdLife International project, which is identified every single year, and it's for a worthy conservation cause. We are racing for conservation. So I think to sum up, I mean, our point, Toni will agree with me. It's Youth Africa birding hasn't died down. It's expanded. It's flown over, or flooded into different platforms, shall I say? And I think it's become a community, like Mark has highlighted. And I think there's just so many exciting things going on for young birders. And, you know, when I sit back and I reflect on how we initially discussed how could we assist in creating something back in the day, and using America and Europe and all these countries which had a much larger presence of youth birding. How could we do that? I sit back and I look at where we are now, and it's extremely positive and it's exciting, and I'm excited for the like of Mark and Joel and all these other lighties coming through as I lose my hair and gain more years towards 30. You know, it's so exciting seeing these youngsters come through and what lies in wait for ornithology and conservation, let alone bird watching as a hobby.
Yeah, thanks, you two. I think you must really be commended on taking that step. Again, it was just some young people seeing a gap, not knowing enough other young birders, and just making a decision to do something about it and to bring people together. So, I mean, that group's been really incredible for my development as well in terms of making new friends. I mean, as you say, there's you and I over in Israel with Josiah and Vardy as well. That was an incredible trip and showed people that you know, the youth can make a difference, and we will make a difference, and our voices do need to be heard. So in terms of getting communities of birders together, I did a similar thing to Merlyn when I was at university and decided I didn't know enough young birders, and I decided to found the Uct Birding Club, which I believe from Joel, who's the treasurer now, is still going strong, which is very pleasing to me to hear. I had worried that COVID had killed that off as well, but it's good to hear that it's still going. So I'm going to transfer over to Joel on the subject of bird clubs. Joel, we've got over 40 affiliated bird clubs at BirdLife South Africa, spread all across the country, and I know you are quite involved with the Cape Bird Club. You've led walks and outings for them. You've been involved in organising different events, and you're a member of the Cape Bird Club and the Uct Birding Club. But as Mark said when he was introducing why he loves birds, he brought the average age of the Lakes Bird Club down to a meager 73. So, you know, I want to know from you, what are your opinions? Are there places for young people at bird clubs? Should young people be making use of those bird clubs, even if they are of a different generation? Do you think there's value for young people in bird clubs?
I definitely feel that bird clubs have tremendous value. Personally, joining the bird club, I found them really welcoming, especially for younger birders. I was definitely, well, I still am one of the younger members, and they're not all that many of us, but the people there have been incredibly welcoming and really tried to help me grow, and I've learned a lot from them and made some really good friends. And we go do birding, and we go on twitches and outings together. And so in me growing up as a birder, I found it really beneficial, and yeah, it creates that a place where you can go and have a community of birders. Where like with me growing up, it was always birding was something that I did on my own or with my grandparents, and I didn't really have that community about it. And joining a bird club, like the Cape Bird Club, was was really nice in that I could meet other people who were passionate about what I was passionate about. And like that's, young people also sometimes, I get the feeling that they feel like they're not necessarily going to have anything in common, so like with the older birder. And what I found is that you're all passionate about birds, and you have that common common thing between you. So you have a base to start like a conversation with, and you can develop it from there. And like a lot of my good friends in the bird club are much older than I am, but we have that shared love for birds, and it's just, I mean, it's really cool that we can share that. And I know like the Cape Bird Club has really tried to get younger people involved, so that they've had talks in schools and trying to reach out into schools to get young people involved, and they definitely have sparked interest in people, but it is difficult, like as like Merlyn was saying, there's not always that representation of younger people, and especially younger people of color in the birding community. So it's great that there are people that are there for younger people to look up to and to aspire to in some way. And in terms of like the UCT Bird Club, it was joining that last year, which was really cool because I got to meet younger birders, and it was really nice to get a different perspective on some birding and to meet a different demographic of birder that you sometimes meet people on pictures and things, but you don't really necessarily get to know them the same way you get to know people in a bird club, because you get to have those longer conversations and you go to meetings together and you create friendships there. So I definitely think bird clubs, so whether it's larger bird clubs like the Cape Bird Club or smaller ones like the UCT Bird Club, they're definitely beneficial. And I would definitely recommend that if you're a birder, you can get involved in the bird club. And yeah, for me, it's definitely helped me grow as a birder.
Thanks for those insights, Joel. I'm going to ask Mark as well. Mark, you're involved with the Lakes Bird Club. Have your experiences been pretty similar to Joel's?
Yeah, pretty similar. I mean, joining Lakes Bird Club, I went from birding just with my birding buddy to birding with the rest of the club. And at that stage, it was me and him who were the youngest. So we got a lot of attention all of a sudden. You know, we joined the club and everyone knew us and we knew no one. So it was like, oh, hi, Mark. How was the last outing for you? Did you enjoy that Marina Trogon sighting? And I'm like, hello, Auntie. Yeah, it was awesome. You know, I don't know these people, but now, you know, over time, get to know everyone and get to respect everyone, because, yeah, sure, a lot of them are much older and they just go birding because it's their free time. But some of them have been birding for a very, very long time. And I think older people are there for the younger people to look up to, because they've been there for so much longer and been through everything you have and much more. So I think old people, as we would might say, are definitely there for us to learn from. And I think that is something that youth must watch themselves for these days, because there's a lot of youth activity these days, you know, youth this, youth that, activism, and it's all cool. But we just mustn't get prideful about who we are and what standard we're actually at, because there's a lot we still need to learn. And I think we need to learn that from the older people. And so, you know, there are people in the bird club who just go there, as I said, for free time, and it's because they want to spend their retirement on something to do. But even they are people you can learn from and have interesting conversations about. But then there's also those people who, like Pete again, he's still one of my mentors. He's part of Lakes Bird Club, and he's a published bird author, a book author for bird books. He's been in Zimbabwe. He used to be a professional bird guide. He has so much knowledge, and he doesn't walk around all that much anymore because he's much older. but that knowledge that that man has is amazing, and he still does bird lectures and stuff like that. So something that we mustn't forget when birding is that another part of the stereotype is patience. And in order to be a birder, you need to be patient, especially when dealing with older people, because a lot of younger people are very distant from older people. You know, they think, oh, that's not my crew. You know, I'll go hang out with my chummies. You know, it's, you got to learn. I mean, joining a bird club is lekker. You'll be lucky if there are younger people there, although these days it's growing. But then you've got to be able to put yourself at a lower standard and just listen sometimes, because trust me, you will get a lot of attention either way. So yeah, that's my say.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I think
Can I also add?
Yeah, I'll let you go now, Merlyn. I just wanted to say, Mark, wow, there's some pretty insightful words from a 17-year-old. I wish I was that wise at 17. You can go ahead, Merlyn.
Yeah, I want to add from the Zimbabwean perspective how valuable bird clubs are. So in Matabeleland in Zimbabwe, we've had the Black Eagle survey that is driven entirely by citizen scientists. And they've been monitoring the breeding of black eagles, the densest population in the entire range, since 1964. And they've been doing it, and there's this amazing effort, and it's such a pride to be part of the Black Eagle survey. And they're now all these old women and men annually coming back and forming teams and going out, and there's this whole data. They also started something called the Waterfall Counts in the 80s. And I know now, being the winter, they're waking up very early. And from their waterfall counts, I know there's so much information out there on the infiltration of our rivers and our dams with water hyacinth and different trends that can be picked out. That if only young people like myself are allowed to get into these clubs, use this data, influence the citizen scientists into using new techniques in science and so on. And it's been my biggest dream to have my club really attached and mentored by these older people. And in my last year in Zimbabwe, I served as the secretary for this older club before my youth club was formed. And my parting request for them was, can I have a permanent youth club representative in the main committee? And they welcomed that because they loved working with me. So now there is a link between the youth club. The youth club feels accountable to the older club. So they are churning out reports, monthly reports for the older club. So it's keeping them going that way because they want the older club to see what they're doing, invite them on and trust them with these programs, these surveys that they've been carrying out. And before I left, they were so supportive enough to give me old binoculars, which my youth are sharing and using, old field guides. None of them out there have field guides, and even with the situation in Zimbabwe, it's quite hard to find bookshops that have this kind of material. So even bird guides are something that is hard to get a hold of. And we've been supported by the Bird Club in giving old material for the youth to use. And I'd like to mention especially my professor, Peter Mundy. He's been lending the club this box of really old, maybe World War II binoculars that they take on every trip when they go out. And it makes the experience so much rewarding and exciting for any new birder that would have come, because they can get to use binoculars for the first time, see the birds amongst their peers. So I think if there wasn't a club already functional and very active with surveys and material to lend the youth, I wouldn't have had so much success with my youth club. So I find so much value in these older bird clubs. So.
Thanks, Merlyn. I think you've raised a really good point there about the contribution that our bird clubs do make to birding and also to conservation. And that's definitely true in South Africa as well as the bird clubs. I think bird conservation would be much, much worse off than it is now without the amazing efforts of bird clubs, not only raising money, but as you say, contributing to citizen science and encouraging all these little projects. And we really do value our bird clubs. So I think there's a challenge out there to the youth. Don't be put off by the average age, as Mark put it. There's value there for you. And to the bird clubs who are struggling to attract young people, keep at it. You have value to add, and I think young people should be more involved in our bird clubs. Wonderful. We've been going on for quite a while.
Can I quickly just add something on citizen science?
Yes, please, Joel.
Yeah, so citizen science is quite a big part of what a couple of the Cape Bird Club members do. And it's been really great because they introduced me to atlasing and to incorporating that part of that citizen science into my birding. And it's really changed how I look at my birding activity. So I don't necessarily just go out and try and see what birds are there. I go and try and go actively try and do an atlas card, or to actually make sure that my birding efforts are making a difference in some way. And I don't think it would be that way if it wasn't for other people showing me how to do that. So I think in that way that the bird clubs are really great in encouraging citizen science.
Yeah, wonderful. And I think it's quite an attractive avenue for youth to get involved in birding. Citizen science and atlasing creates a bit of excitement and purpose around your birding. Of course, it contributes to conservation, which young people are generally, I think, quite invested in. Of course, we've got a long future on this planet yet, so we've got to invest in looking after it, so that both we and our kids can benefit. And I think also, the listing aspect of atlasing is, I like to relate it to collecting Pokemon. I think Kyrone might agree with me here. People, and John's smiling away. I know he's also a closet Pokemon fan. But this idea of collecting and the excitement around finding new things, it all plays into the youth mindset. I think that's maybe something bird clubs need to pay attention to and maybe to accentuate in order to attract younger people. I'm going to just wrap up that question. I think it's been really, really useful discussions. I'd like to end on, we've talked about bird clubs, so I'm going to move it more to conservation, although it's a similar issue. BirdLife South Africa, for instance, is one example of a conservation NGO doing really good work, but really struggling to attract younger members. Again, we struggle with this stigma of birding and conservation being mainly invested in by older white people, and our organization seems to suffer the same fate of like attracting like. And we really struggle to access different demographics, whether they be cultural or age related. So from the youth, we are a youth panel. I think starting with Kyrone, I'm putting you on the spot here because you are actually now working at BirdLife and have an idea of what goes on. I want to know from people, starting with Kyrone, and then I'll open it up. What can we in conservation do more of, and what should we be doing more of to attract people, younger people in particular, but also I think in the theme of Youth Day, people from different demographics? Kyrone, starting with you.
Yeah, great question again. I think because I work for the organization, I really know what we can do and what we can't do, despite all the things that we want to do. And it really starts with, trying to incentivize it, make it look fun. It's like you brought up that Pokemon thing. How different is using BirdLife and going birding to actual Pokemon Go, which was such a craze amongst the youth. If we can somehow make it seem it's so similar and incentivize it and say, hey, let's start this thing at a school level, these competitions possibly, because that's what it's about. We need to somehow create the awareness within the youth and even the younger people from primary schools, let's get them into it. I think that's very important because I don't see any other way. I don't see, despite the great work that everyone is doing here, it could be so much easier if a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old walks into the club knowing what's the plan really, instead of trying to get them into things. This is my plea to everyone else there to just support BirdLife South Africa really, because we have so many things planned. Andrew, yourself, as a AV tourism project manager, you have so many things you want to do, and you know that will make such a difference. It's just we have limited capacity. We have to call on civilians to start their own things, their own minor projects, community stuff. It's just like that's what I can say. All we can do is incentivize it, make it fun for everyone, or else it's just like maybe I'll do it one day, and then if they don't have an exciting outing, then it's never done again. Unless we always take people to the grasslands where it's more exciting than anywhere else. I don't really know what else to say, because I know firsthand that there's only so much we can do. It's just about roping as many people in and just getting that funding, getting those ideas going, and people passionate.
Can I just say how awesome it is that we've got Kyrone and we've got Andrew here, who are both involved in the country's leading ally conservation organization, one of the world's most highly respected divisions thereof, participating in this conversation this evening. And the bottom line is Andrew, even though you're a couple months shy of 30, we'll forgive you. Kyrone, you're still a youngster as well. Here we have two examples of people who've been influenced and who've taken it one step further and who are directly involved in the conservation of our birds and biodiversity and our wildlife. And it goes for each and every one of us. Yeah. So, if that's the case, then I think there's something that's being done right. And if we are busy running around with our SASL Pokédexes, it's already reached us so much that it should be reaching other people as well. So there's a change over to the more encouraging side for sure. And I think Andrew and Kyrone, you guys and everybody else, there's a lot of the youngsters at BirdLife South Africa involved in the organization. People like Melissa as well. You guys are in fantastic positions to influence people in the younger generation and say, you know what, guys, here we are. We're not old people, and we're fighting for birds and conservation on a daily basis. And that in itself is very, very exciting.
Thanks, John. That's very kind of you to say. And I'd like to reflect that back to everyone on the panel. I think tonight's panel is a reflection of the incredible spread of people that we have making a difference and contributing and encouraging people to get involved in birds and nature and ultimately conservation, which is, of course, what BirdLife South Africa is about.
I really think getting into schools is a really fantastic idea because you're getting to influence kids when they still finding what they're passionate about. And I think the key to conservation is people are going to conserve what they're passionate about. For me, I couldn't see myself really caring too much about bird conservation if I wasn't really passionate about birds and nature. And so I think that's a really great idea to further conservation. And I think as birders, I think it's really important for us to introduce birding to even now, as young people, to influence the younger people and to introduce birding to them, because that's what other people have done for us. I know that other birders have done so much for me in helping me grow, and I think it's really important, if that's been the case for you to do that for other people, and that through that the ideas of conservation will spread through the community.
Thanks, Joel. Anyone else got anything to add?
I'd like to say that something that's worked for me, that I've experienced, that will work at all levels in roping people into birding, is going to where people are and telling stories. Telling stories to people shows that you see them, because you're you're approaching somebody and wanting to be at their level, looking for something that would trigger their interest. So as an organization, going to a school or going to a community center in Gugulethu in Cape Town, for example, and starting to talk about birds in a polluted environment, or talking about birds in around polluted water or something like that, shows that you see them. You're not going to start talking about bird tourism to them, or start talking about other things that does not relate to their everyday life. And if it's even on an individual level, I'm reminded of a time I was birding with an engineering friend. I invited her over to bird, and the conversation had only started because we were talking about stream hardening because of engineering. I'd spoken to her about water purification because she had a thesis to purify wastewater, and make jet fuel from urine. And from that, we ended up walking on the Liesbeek, and I was pointing out important things about wetland birds and the streams and how engineering is affecting birding. So just keeping an open mind, making it easy for people to access the information you have, but also making it palatable and from their level.
Thank you, Merlyn. I think that's really valuable input. Keeping it relevant to people is how you reach them. And I think all these comments now are going to be taken back and probably discussed at the next BirdLife South Africa senior management meeting or board meeting on how we can encourage the next generation of youth to care about birds and to champion the conservation cause. So I think it's a great way to wrap up. It just leaves me to say to everyone, thank you so much for making the time this evening. And I figured since it's Youth Day, and I thought it would be a good idea to finish with a quote from South Africa's Tata Madiba. And he said, "To the youth of today, I also have a wish to be the script writers of your destiny and feature yourselves as stars that show the way towards a brighter future." And I think this panel has the ability and the potential to be the stars of the future. Some of you have already made incredible strides and are being change makers in your communities. Thank you for that, and thank you for tuning in tonight. That was a really, really robust, really open and honest, and really valuable discussion. And I think all of us tonight were really, really thank you for your time and your honesty and your insights. Thanks to all of you.
Great. So I just want to say thank you very much to our panel for your very interesting and insightful, and as Andrew said, open and honest discussions. I'd like to ask our panelists now to turn on your videos and unmute yourselves. So thank you very much again for your time. Also thank you to Andrew for putting the panel together and running the discussion and doing the recording. And sorry that you weren't able to host tonight. There are a lot of good points made and a lot of discussion happening in the chat. So thank you to the audience for that as well. So I know we're running a little bit later than usual, so I'll keep the question time short, but I think everyone watching will agree that this has been a very worthwhile and valuable discussion to have. So if you would like to pose any questions to any of the panelists, you can put them in the Zoom Q&A box or in the Facebook Live comments, and indicate if you'd like to direct the question to a specific person on the panel. And I'd also like to remind everyone to please participate in the post-webinar survey, which will pop up when you exit the webinar. It will just take you 2 minutes of your time. And then just to remind you that next week, we're again in a celebratory mood as we host our annual OWL Awards evening. Each year, BirdLife South Africa recognizes the contributions of individuals and organizations to the conservation of birds and their habitats. And this year we have an impressive and diverse array of OWL Award winners. So we encourage you to join in and help us celebrate these people next week. So now I'll go into some questions, but I'd ask our panelists to please keep your responses as brief as possible, as we are running short on time. So I think the first one I'll ask, and I'll direct it to Merlyn, but anyone can add in after she's finished, and that's from Lerato Trok, who is the author of the recent book, The Forgotten Scientist, about Saul Sithole. And she's asked, how does one start a birding club? She'd like to start one in the township of Mamelodi in honor of Saul Sithole. And then maybe the second part of the question is there a birding club in Pretoria that can help with that? And I know there are a number of bird clubs, so if there are any bird club members in the Pretoria area, please reach out to BirdLife and we'll put you in contact with Lerato. But Merlyn, perhaps you can answer the first part of the question.
Thank you, Christina. I think starting a bird club is just maybe opening people up to your passion for birds. And I find it's easy and organic if you start with common birds that you find where the people are. Talk to them about things they may relate to about those birds. Ask them what they know about those birds. Often it's easy to assume people have no experience or knowledge of anything about birds, but starting a conversation and making them feel they can impart knowledge back to you makes it very easy. So depending on the demographic and the age groups, going to schools, making friends with people and having them invite their friends. But it's very important to have material and binoculars to enhance the experience and interest of people. That's my suggestion. But situations differ.
Thanks, Merlyn. That's a good answer. And I hope, Lerato, that you are able to start a bird club. And if anyone in the Pretoria area can help, please do reach out. I'm just looking for the next question. There we go. Londeka Dlamini asks, and I guess it's not specifically towards youth, but it's something that a lot of our panelists touched on, is how to break down that lack of awareness or understanding about what birding is, and how to introduce the topic of birding to people. So I don't know if anyone wants to have a go at that, and especially from a youth perspective. There seems to be a little bit of feedback there. Perhaps
Toni, your microphone's on. Yeah.
Perhaps if I can put Mark on the spot, given that you are, as you say, the nature guy in your school, have you tried anything to try and break down those barriers to understand what birding is about?
Yeah, no, definitely, indeed, I have. So I go to an eco school. It's supposedly the eco school of the garden route, in the garden route's botanical gardens. And so there's about 100 kids in my high school, no more than that. And I could basically say I'm the only birder in that school, unfortunately. And so, yeah, as I said in that comment I made a bit earlier, there are a couple of mates at school who I've taken out, like walking around the botanical gardens, just saying, listen, I'm going out birding, you want to come with? And they say, oh yeah, sure. Because I just see they're standing around there chatting about nonsense. So it's like, okay, let me just invite them. And some of them have been keen to come along. Some of them have just done it to act kind. But yeah, I have had success with one of the oaks. One of my friends came with me, and like we were looking at some birds, and then we looked at this forest buzzard perched up overlooking the school, and I handed him the binoculars and he looked through it and he's like, wow, why is it so close? I'm like, okay, the binoculars are obviously good. So, but then he looked at it, he's like, wow, look at the details on this thing and it's actually so beautiful. And then the trigger word for me was like, wow, I actually kind of like this birding thing. And that just made me smile, you know. So it's a step closer to getting youth more involved in birding. And there's no point in me pushing the kids to say, or the guys at school to say, like, listen, birding is awesome. You've got to come with me. You've got to try it out. It's actually really cool. There's no point in me saying that it's really cool. They got to find that out for themselves. And I think the only way for them to do that is for them to try, and me just ask them to come along if I go for a walk around the botanical gardens or something. But instead of, you know, trying to get kids out there to go birding, kids and youth, I've started an outdoor adventure club in the garden route where it's not for birders as such. It's for anyone who wants to get out into the nature reserves and stuff in the area, particularly the Uct Mountains, because there's no borders there. You can just walk. And it's a family-friendly club I'm trying to build to get people interested in nature, and they can kind of discover which part of nature they want to be most interested in. So I don't want to force anyone to go into birding as such, but I honestly think it's one of the best ways to get interested in nature. That's just my preference. And I'm sure your guys as well. But yeah, Life Adventures Outdoor Club is a family-friendly club I'm trying to start to get people out. And it's free of charge at the moment. It's just to go out and explore the nature that's right at our doorstep in the city of George. So that's how I've tried.
That's great. And it's great to hear that you're starting a kind of broader club to get people interested in nature in general, and hopefully they'll lean towards birds, but even getting people interested in nature is a win in my opinion. Does anyone else have a thought on that? Toni?
Yes, Christina, if you don't mind. I think one thing that I definitely agree with Mark on is something which, in my personal opinion as well, is parents should never force birding or being involved in wildlife or liking nature on their children. I've seen a lot of my friends where they parents come to me and it's like, how can we get them involved? And it's sort of just something you have to expose your child to. The minute you force a child onto something, there's generally this kickback, and they get this block in their mind about it. They don't want to get involved in it. So that's definitely something I would recommend to all parents. Don't force your child to do something, but just expose them to it. Take them out, take them into nature, take them to parks, take them to Kruger National Park, get them exposed to wildlife, and I'm sure the bug's going to bite. Something as well as bird lasser, that's been super, super cool. I had a friend just the other day, we were talking about our birding adventures and bird lasser, and he was mind blown that we can log a bird and it takes its GPS location, the time, the date, where you saw it, when you saw it. I mean, bird lasser also has an option where you can put notes. So was it on a nest? Did you see chicks? Was it a mating pair? And that just caught his attention immediately, and that's how you're going to get more youth involved in this, by mentioning the aspects of nature and mentioning the photography and the listing aspect and all of that, and that's how the bug's going to bite.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And I think the beauty of birding and birds is that they can be found anywhere. Even if you don't have access to the Kruger or somewhere, you can find birds in your backyard pretty much no matter where you find yourself. But I think we're going to leave it there. It's now 20:35, and we're sort of over our usual conservation conversations time limits. So I'd just like to say thank you very much again to our wonderful panel. I must say I'm a little bit intimidated and definitely in awe by what you have all managed to achieve. And I can only say we wish you all the best for the future, and we look forward to watching your birding and conservation careers in the future. And yeah, wish you every success. And if there is anything any of you would like to say in closing, please unmute yourselves and go ahead and do that. But I'd also encourage you to read through the chat. There's some lovely comments coming through there. But if anyone has any closing remarks, just unmute yourselves now. Nope.
No, I just want to say thanks very much for having us on, and it was a very interesting discussion.
Great, thanks, Joel. And yeah, so I'll leave the Zoom room open for a few more minutes in case anyone wants to put any more comments in the chat box. Also, if you did have any questions that we didn't manage to get to, please get in contact with us. You can email conversations@birdlife.org.za and with your questions, and we will then pass them on to the relevant panelist and try and get an answer for you. So yeah, all that remains for me to do is say thank you very much and good night.